Identity collapse is a death portal, not a failure. When you claim courage as your foundation, you don't just survive the messy chrysalis of transformation, you learn to thrive through it. Welcome everyone to the Yin-care podcast. I'm your host, Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising, and I'm so happy to see you here today. We have an excellent episode for you. If you've ever been through an identity crisis, or if you feel like you're going through one, this episode is speaking directly to you. When I went through my divorce in 2010, everything completely collapsed around me. It was a highly contentious divorce. And throughout the process, I was gaslit, manipulated by attorneys, my ex's family, all along the way. I had so heavily invested myself in the identity of being happily married that even though I hadn't actually been happy for many years, I just felt like that was who I was and who I was supposed to be. I lost many friends and family members. I was incredibly fortunate, though, at that time to have had a wonderful guide that walked me through. She was a clairvoyant astrologist who really helped me see the bigger picture and helped me to build my inner resources to help me navigate the many years that happened to be ahead of me, where I was dealing still with the repercussions of the divorce. But it helped me lay the foundation for creating the new and absolutely, truly beautiful life that I have. My guest today specializes in helping women transition from chaos to chrysalis to clarity, and she is a wonderful returning guest. Please welcome back Patricia Hernandez Stalder from episode 43. When Patricia was last on the show, she shared her powerful journey of tapping her own intuitive wisdom to heal herself and trust her own inner voice. Since then, her work has evolved beautifully. As a self-mastery coach, she now guides women through the raw experience of identity collapse and helps them transition into their true next chapters. Patricia's own path is a rich tapestry of transformation. She's a mother of 2 adult children, a former Montessori school teacher, and an entrepreneur who was a prominent influencer for zero waste and sustainability. She's half Spanish and half Swiss, and she was raised in the UK, went through a divorce after nearly 30 years of marriage, and currently lives in the Canary Islands. Today, she balances her coaching practice with ongoing deep study. Every twist and turn of Patricia's life has led her to develop what she calls original intelligence, the belief that we all possess innate organic mastery tools that we simply need to reactivate, remember, and train. Now that she's back on the show, we are going to be diving deep into the engine that drives this entire transformation. Today, we're discussing why courage is an essential mastery tool for navigating identity loss and exactly how that courage is cultivated. And so with that, welcome in, Patricia. I'm so happy to have you with us today.
Hi, Margaret. So good to be back. Lovely to be back with you.
Yin-care's Blossom Biome is a vaginal-focused probiotic to support your inner ecology, your vaginal biome, not just your gut. You can use it orally or vaginally as part of your health creation journey. I'm not here to give you a bunch of warnings. I trust your womb wisdom to self-govern and choose what's right for you. Find it in our womb wisdom store at yincare.com/shop. So this is really such a near and dear to my heart topic because of, the personal experience that I had with my own identity collapse. And interestingly, at the time, I too used the same chrysalis description of what was going on. And I'm pretty sure because we've had a couple of conversations before we decided to do this episode, but that when you're in that chrysalis really, or when a caterpillar is basically in the chrysalis, everything dissolves into this gooey, mucky, messy, gel, basically. And then somehow has the intelligence to configure itself into this beautiful butterfly, which is amazing. So I think it's wonderful that you're using that.
Yeah, I love that imagery, and it's just so precisely what happens, because it's not that the caterpillar comes out on the other side becoming a better caterpillar. It just completely transforms, and that requires a complete dissolution of the state that it was in when it entered that chrysalis. And that's essentially what happens when, after big trauma or big life changes, we no longer feel like we can carry on that identity into our new phase. So I think what happens, why it's called a crisis or a collapse, is that all of the foundations that helped to sustain and keep this identity, this persona, this character alive, it is no longer valid. You cannot move that person forward into the next stage. So essentially, the person that took you up to this moment can no longer continue. And that's why most women describe this phase as a complete collapse, which involves grief, anger, a lot of fear, uncertainty, lack, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that was a great description.
It's death. It's a true death. It is walking through a death portal in so many ways.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's one of the most potent thresholds that we cross, because it's during that messy in-between part where part of us makes that decision to stay and repeat the same cycle because we're too scared to move on. And it feels more comfortable to stay with the familiar than to go somewhere unfamiliar or to awaken. So it's kind of, the path splits into two there when you're in that chrysalis, and you have to make that choice. And this is where courage comes in, because when you are letting go of everything that you were, but you're still not sure what you're becoming, all of this uncertainty and lack of clarity and inner conflict and chaos and tension, all of these come under that umbrella of fear. And fear, what it does is it interrupts the natural evolution, your natural identity evolution, if you will, that has to take place for you to move into your next season or your next phase. And the reason courage is so important is it's the only, actually, there's a beautiful definition by Maya Angelou. And she says, courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you cannot practice all the other virtues consistently. And we're talking about self-trust, self-love, compassion, all the things that are going to get you through that. You can't do that without courage. The setting of boundaries, discernment, and ultimately transformation and change. You cannot do that without the courage. So there's another really beautiful definition. I can't remember if it's Mark Twain. And he says, courage is not lack of fear. It is the resistance to fear and the mastery of fear. So essentially, it's that kind of willingness to be true to yourself, even though you still don't have any certainty, right? So you make this commitment to be true, even though you don't have any answers. That is courage. Yeah.
It's like a bridge to creating the coherent frequency you need to attune to the next, the person that you're becoming. Like you need to get your vibrational frequency, tuned in to receive who that new person is. But you literally cannot do that if you're blocked by the incoherence of fear.
Exactly. And that I was actually reading, or rather listening to Dan Winter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work on, or his theory of emotion. Yeah. And he actually explained that in his work that fear is the only inorganic emotion. So, for example, you have all of the life-affirming or life-giving states or emotions such as love and compassion. They're all based on the golden ratio, right? So what this does is it allows the electrical waves to kind of the body to kind of settle into this beautiful fractal arrangement, right? And then from there, he explains there's this kind of wave collapse or implosion, which generates life force coherence. And then he explains that fear does the complete opposite of this. It actually disrupts, or it causes a shift of frequency in the biological field. So it prevents that beautiful golden ratio wave collapse implosion thing. And what happens is that the energy patterns of the body, instead of coming together, they separate, which is inorganic because there's a disconnect or a disassociation from the coherent whole. So that explains it beautifully. When we are looking to heal or to evolve or to remember or to go back to our original state, our original intelligence, our organic human template, we need to move back into coherence. And fear does the complete opposite of that. It keeps us paralyzed and frozen and in this state of incoherence. Wow. So the first step is the courage, that willingness to move through, even though you don't know what's going to happen. And something really interesting when I was looking into courage, because I like to backward engineer everything to see where this came from, because I was stuck in this kind of chicken and egg situation where I was thinking, okay, but what do you need before courage? You need to trust. But what comes from courage? So which one comes first? So then I thought, okay, to be able to move through fear and uncertainty, you need to trust in yourself. You need to trust that you're being held. And in order to trust, what is the step before that? You need to surrender, right? And that requires humility. That requires this being able to say, I know nothing. I need to be guided, right? So I realized that humility is almost the other side of that coin, the other side of courage, right? So there is a process where when you're inside that chrysalis and all of this dissolution is happening, the dissolution of self, the dissolution of everything I thought I knew, the people that I thought were on my side, the people, places, and things that used to hold me don't hold me anymore. There's this complete dissolution of everything that used to sustain me or everything that was me, right? So that is a very crucial point, because this is either where people completely disconnect or dissociate and say, well, I'm helpless, no one can help me. Or they say, well, you know what, if all of this is falling apart anyway, and I don't know who I am anyway, let me just start from zero. And that's the most liberating thing you can do, is to say, I know nothing. And if I know nothing, I can't fail. I can't judge myself, right? Almost as if you're being reborn, right? You cannot judge a baby who's 1 day old and knows nothing, right?
Yes.
And that's very liberating. It's very liberating for healing to just say, you know what, I'm just going to start from scratch. That stepping into the humility of, I'm going to allow myself to move forward, even though the path is uncertain. So that's one of the biggest reasons I urge women to really enjoy almost that dissolution, because from there is where this new butterfly is going to emerge with a completely different identity. And
yeah, that's wonderful. Gosh, I love that so much. I talk a lot about establishing trust in ourselves, especially as it relates to, as in the conversations we've had before about learning to trust your intuition and building the trust muscle. Like that's a big, big piece. But I never drilled down like you just did on that piece about this surrender and humility, allowing for this sort of beautiful soil foundation for courage to kind of enter in so that you can start to build that trust muscle.
I love that you just said soil foundation, because do you know the root of the word humility, where it comes from?
No, well, humus, I would think, right? So earth.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. Yeah. I never thought about it, but wow, that's interesting. That's incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you think about it, it is coming right down close to the earth. You're not up there in the clouds. You're not elevated anymore. You're just humble. You're down there with that earth from where where you've come from, with that Mother Earth, that nourishing, nurturing rebirth, right? So yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds so cool. So, I mean, so cool the way we've just had in this conversation sort of laid it together. It feels so good. It feels so good in my heart. Just put a lot of pieces for me. So I'm loving that. So let's just chat about, well, also, I do want to lay one more thing that was like passing through my head while we were talking about that, and just honoring the root word of courage too. So courage is rooted in cur, which is your heart, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And this is where your organic coherence comes from, right? When you go back to the heart, because what fear is, and actually when I was talking about fear before, when I was talking about Dan Winter, when he was talking about fear, he wasn't talking about organic fear. He was talking about systemic fear. So kind of like media-induced fear, or fear that comes from programming, So that's really interesting, because what we are all searching for essentially is sovereignty, right? To go back to your essence. And the heart is that part of you that hasn't been programmed, that hasn't been conditioned. So it is a very organic experience to go back in there. This is where the courage comes from. This is where your virtues and your values are held. So what courage does is it creates more coherence between your values and your actions, right? Because everyone can talk about their values, but fear is what keeps them out of alignment with those values. So you might have values, but you may not be living that. May not be showing up in that way. So yeah, it's a top mastery tool, courage.
Definitely. And so many things passed through my mind as you were saying that. One was that I was just finishing up one of my medical indoctrination series talks last night, and there's one of the pieces is related to just values, and looking at, aligning yourself with your values with a practitioner that, like a doctor or whoever you choose to work with, and making sure that your values line up. But so oftentimes, and you see that the fear overrides the courage, the heart coherence to even just speak with a doctor, that there's this fear of being bullied or manipulated or looking bad or being shamed or whatever. So, and these are interesting pieces actually, as it relates to big foundational changes in any relationship or life crisis that will lead women through to these spaces where it's one thing to start to find your courage, in your own space. but then you have to step out into the world, right? And face with other people, other things, family members, all of that stuff can make it really challenging to, it's like you have to metamorphose, not totally in a full cocoon, right?
Yeah.
Ways.
Yeah.
I mean, for people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. The life doesn't wait for you to be fully aligned and fully coherent and fully healed. But this is where these mastery tools really help. So, for example, mindfulness. Mindfulness is one of the greatest mastery tools, one of the greatest practices, because what it allows you to do is to train yourself to go slow enough. First of all, you develop these, you develop self-love and self-trust, and it allows you to go slow enough to catch yourself between that stimulus and the response, right? So another good practice is journaling. Like, what are the things that tend to catch me off guard when I'm out there in the world, when I'm talking to people, when I know that I have to be in a situation, in a place or an environment where I'm not aligned with these people's opinions or values or ideal? How can I cultivate that patience? How can I cultivate that anchoring, that sovereignty, that integrity, and that honoring of myself, so that I don't step out of line, so that I don't become upset or cause tension or conflict in this situation? And so when you are seasoned enough in mindfulness practice, what you find yourself doing is those pauses or those moments between a stimulus, say something somebody says, and your response, they become longer, right? So that gives you time to choose. It gives you the wisdom to listen and time to choose and discern and select what you're going to say, right? So what courage does in this case is that it transforms fear from the driver to the messenger, right? And so when you haven't practiced with these tools, or you haven't been when you haven't been using these mindfulness tools, and you're still acting out of habit, right? You have fear, and then you have this contraction that occurs, right, in the body. Whereas when you are in presence and awareness, which is what mindfulness helps you to do, you have fear, and then you have this wisdom that listens, and then you choose. So the fear is the messenger. It's sending you message. What is this fear telling me? It's telling me this, that, or the other, right? And you disassociate from that. So you just see it for what it is. And then you're able to respond to that. So it shifts the power that fear has over you, right? Yeah.
That's beautiful. And this kind of practice that I'm going through right now, the question is, what beautiful, deep learning can I get from this? What is it here for? What is it showing up for?
Yeah.
And it is, they're little gifts, even though they're uncomfortable gifts. They're gifts.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm reflecting back on my own process going through the divorce, and that, I was like, I was a mess. I was literally a mess. It was like, there were just like piles of tissues that had been, my nose blown, and tears like all over the house. And, but there were little ways that I just kept creating ways that stabilized me, that would help me, that would help keep an environment for me to start to come into this coherence. Every day, and I just want to emphasize this, like every day took courage. Like, I had to take the kids to school every day and face a community that I felt in my heart did not like me at all. That there were things somehow, whether or not that's true is so hard to tell, right? You know what I mean? But in my mind, I felt judged. I felt less than. I felt like a failure because of my, marriage, all of this stuff. And so just showing up was really big. But there were little things that we would do to create new rituals that made it playful and fun so that my heart would like we had to wait. I had moved to a town nearby, and it was about 15 minutes from where the kids were going to school. So on the days that I had them, we would have to wait, in this, I don't, some people may be familiar with Tiburon, California. It's a beautiful, like really gorgeous place to live. I called it my fancy bus stop. I knew I wouldn't get to live there for very long, but it was beautiful, but it like a peninsula out. And so there's only one road in and one road out. So you're stuck in traffic trying to get where we'd have to go, which was the town over, which was Mill Valley. And driving, we all had bubbles. So we would just let bubbles, we had this stream of bubbles going outside the car. And I'm sure this was a very pretentious, very uppity, area. I'm sure that people were like, what is on with that weird minivan? Why are they? I don't know. I just wanted to share that because, there's just these little things that we have to do. I know that was not totally on tangent with being mindful, but in some ways it is. It's being mindful of the fact that I recognize that I'm feeling not good about going to do this. I'm going to shift and make it fun, at least.
Yeah, it's great that you said that because, again, when you think that courage, to have courage, you need to first go back to humility. So what humility does is it breaks everything down it strips everything down to this very raw and organic human template, which is essentially the template of the child, right?
Yeah,
it's curious, it's creative, right? Sure. Because you know nothing anymore. You're like, well,
right.
I just need to explore now because I've stripped away everything that I was. So it opens, there comes this spaciousness. And spaciousness, with the spaciousness, there's the sense of humor that comes as well, right? These are very, very, very healing. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that resourcefulness or that creativity that you need once you surrender into this new becoming and you start cultivating that courage, it does indeed come with that creativity and curiosity. So yeah. I love that you said that.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So you're going to be teaching these mastery tools, right? You do this, is private coaching too, right?
Yeah, I offer one-to-one mentorship, and then there is a 6-week program that we're starting on the 16th of June. It's called Journey Back to You. But I'm also offering a masterclass on the 6th of June, and that's all on my Instagram page. But yeah, I've created this kind of compilation of mastery tools and practices to help with these specific transitions. And hopefully, what moved me to do this was that I myself went through a big transition. And I had my guides and my mentors and my coaches and therapists that helped me. And I remember something very beautiful from all of this, because the people that helped me through my big life transition were people that had gone through something similar. And one of the things that I like about what I do is that I would never ask somebody to do something that I haven't myself done. So, if I'm talking about practices or different techniques, for example, to apply different dynamics, and sometimes they're combinations of different dynamics or techniques, or I fuse different modalities together. But the reason I know it works is because I had that direct first-hand experience of it, right? And I feel like that's very comforting for the person who's receiving it. Because if you are leading someone by the hand, they want to make sure that you've walked that path and you've come across every single possible obstacle that they might come across. So that's an example of how I was helped, and that inspired me to cultivate the courage to then help others.
Okay, so I have a good question, I think, here. So in receiving the help that you did have during all of this, what were some ways in which your helpers maybe, or people even, they don't have to be the ones that you specifically loved, but ways in which they maybe couldn't help you or didn't help you, or you wanted them to help you? Like, what I'm trying to get at is how you have created something that is different based on how maybe you weren't completely held in that experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good question. I actually had very, very good helpers, but I'd have to think about that. I think, right, okay, so I remember when I was going through this, the people that did help me were people who had very different modalities. So I had an acupuncturist, I had someone who was a coach, then I had therapists who were more holistic, who did Hebrew pendulum or Reiki or... So I decided I would learn all of these modalities so that then I could combine them. And then that person wouldn't have to go to 3 or 4 different people. I think also what back then, I remember thinking, this is not sustainable and it's terribly expensive, right? So what encouraged me to learn everything that I have learned until now and educate myself was the idea that, wait a minute, this is my life, my evolution, my journey, my energy, my emotions. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't have to delegate this to 5 or 6 different people. So I thought, well, I should be master of myself, right? I should be able to have the self-regulation tools, to have the mindfulness tools, the positive psychology, emotional management. I should have all of these tools, right? And then I thought, well, everyone should. So what I've done is that I've looked at what helped me the most, right? What tools you could say are free in the sense that they come from you. They come from your innate wisdom. They come from your inner knowledge. They come from your gnosis. They come from you being able to turn inward and listen. And all of this became the foundations of the School of Original Intelligence. Yeah.
And there's so much that you just layered in there that references back to, if people haven't heard the episode that we did before, so much of you give so many concrete examples of how you did turn inward and developing your own inner tools and your own intuition and your own inner guidance. I mean, I think some of that was happening around the same time that there was like an identity crisis related to your physical health too, right?
Correct. Yeah. And most of these identity collapse or identity crisis or happen around midlife, right? So in women, and what happens around midlife as well is that you naturally become more intuitive anyway. You raised your children by this time, you're kind of moving into a new season of your life. And this is where most women do naturally become more intuitive. And I've never been clairvoyant or had these, very developed higher sense perception. But I thought, okay, so I would probably have to train these. But if this is something I can train, then I'm going to do it. And then I just committed myself to meditation practice, mindfulness, everything that I could get my hands on, which in the beginning was a lot. But then I realized that it all reduces down to your own ability to just sit in stillness and reflect and feel and move through the things that are affecting you and trust and love and so on and so forth. There's no magic formula because someone's not going to give you that. You just have to sit there and put in the work, right? And that requires a tremendous amount of self-love. So,
and the other thing I'll just add though too, because that I don't want that to feel overwhelming for people. Yes, it does take work, but it's really about this persistent and consistency that I always like to refer to it as it's a long game, especially as women, as mothers, as partners, as daughters, sisters, community members. We're holding space for so much. And it's just about it. You can absolutely 100% do this and go through this life transformation while all of that is happening. Like it's absolutely 100% possible, especially when you have someone like Patricia to hold your hand a little bit and give guidance, because we need to hold a girlfriend's hand. Like literally we need a girlfriend to do it. And sometimes it's better to have, in fact, it's almost always better to have someone who's not in your immediate network. Like it's such a sacred space that you don't want, because everybody is from that previous life. It's like you can't include them in what is happening to you because they have a construct already about who you are. And you need the space to deconstruct and reconstruct with somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, correct. And what tends to happen as well, Margaret, and this is one of the signs that most women feel when they're going through this shift in identity, is that they're usually the ones that hold everything together for everyone, right? Yeah. So to admit that you need help is very difficult for many women at this point. And I remember one of my therapists said, well, why haven't you gone to your mother for help or to your sister for help? And I thought, no, I couldn't. I would be letting them down, right? And I do remember she said to me, she said, well, if they asked you for help, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd be honored to help, right? So it kind of, it shifted that for me. She actually said, well, what makes you think it's not an honor for them to help you? But I had been that had been such an important part of my role, of my old identity, keeping everything together for everyone, that asking someone in my immediate circle to help me was out of question, right? Yeah. So
I love that. And I want to honor that. And I feel like that is so true in so many circumstances. That being said, there are people that will come into our spheres that they may feel honored to help you, but they have incredible judgments, or, you know what I mean? Like they have an idea as to what you should or shouldn't do that's really not in alignment or coherence with the new frequency of who you're becoming. So it does take some discernment to know who you're going to invite into that inner world to do that work with you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the space holder or the person that does guide you also knows through their own experience that there is no pattern, there is no blueprint that you are going to give them. You're going to create the steps and the system and the structure for them to walk with you. But the blueprint is for them to unfold. It's their identity that's evolving, right? So it's 100% theirs to unfold and become.
It really is stepping deeper into laying. I mean, it's such an evolution, but it really is a foundation for stepping truly into your own sovereignty. Because generally speaking, when an identity crisis happens, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but we're not living in sovereignty. We are being defined by external sources, or it's not that we have chosen to be defined by external sources as to who we are. Like, for example, when I said at the beginning, like, I thought I was in a happy marriage. I even remember walking down. It's just like such a profound moment for me. I remember walking down the aisle to get married, and I was completely out of my body. Like, I felt like I was an actress inside a body walking through these motions.
Wow.
Like, I saw everybody's eyes on me, and I just started laughing because I felt so weird. Like, it felt so strange to be walking down this, doing this thing. It was like a joke almost, like a cosmic joke in a way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I'm very grateful that I went through the process, that I had this marriage, that I had these amazing kids, that they're so amazing. And I mean, becoming a mother was like such a huge part of my becoming. But there was probably a piece of me that was like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a funny little thing we're going to try. Like, let's see how this goes, And I think there was a part of me that was like tapping into that was like, joke's on you. This isn't going to last forever.
Isn't that funny? Because that is, it's almost like you had this inner knowing that this was not the true you.
And it was something that was so blown out of proportion, right? Like, wedding can be so blown out of proportion, like the perfect wedding. And I mean, we got married in 93, I think it was. So, it was like the Martha Stewart, era that was so big and everything had to be perfect. And I'm not saying it wasn't like that before, but that's where I was at, everything. And I had also internalized this piece this was a big moment for my mom, like my mom really needed this wedding to be what it was. And so, anyway.
It's really interesting because when you think about it, an identity collapses for one reason alone, because it wasn't your true identity. Otherwise, it couldn't collapse, right?
Right.
So what is happening in that chrysalis, there's the dissolution of that old identity, which wasn't really you. So what you're doing essentially is you're taking away those layers, those filters, those shields, those personas that you created as a child to protect you from this hostile world, right? That you needed to help you go along with all the programming and the conditioning and so forth. So that masked your authentic self, right? So the process of shifting into a new identity, it almost doesn't sound correct. Yes, you are becoming, but essentially what you're doing is remembering. You're remembering that essence. And based on that remembrance, you can build. You can then start to have fun, right? You can start to have fun with that. So what you was telling me is actually what happens to everybody when they have that identity collapse is that they realize that if they were being true to their essence, to their soul, to their true selves, if they were authentically themselves, then all of this wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have found this person. They wouldn't have gone through these situations. They wouldn't have reacted and responded in the way that they did. So, yeah, that's
interesting. But I think that there's something to be said about the process of getting there, right? I mean, that's why we're here too. The whole reasoning is, at least in my perception, is there's so much great learning in choosing and having the free will choice and choosing things that aren't in alignment. It's like, oh, that I'm bumping up against that wall. I'm going to hit my head on that wall for a while. How does that feel? Oh, it doesn't feel so good. I think I'll go over here,
Yeah.
So that it's like this, just figuring out where is who you truly are. Find it. Now, that's, in my opinion, and even when you step into the life that feels like that's truly who you are, there's still more that open. You know what I mean? To the capacities, the limitless capacities of being in a human body that start to open up, right? So that leads us into, I believe, original intelligence. So why don't you speak about that? Because that has a depth to it that's not just, tools, the mastery tools that lead you through this. It has depth there, right?
Yeah. So when you were talking about this moving into who you really are, is what happens through this collapse. Really what's happening is it's a rite of passage, right? And wherever there's a rite of passage, it's the overcoming of a fear so that then you can step into the next phase, right? Mm-hmm. So original intelligence is the innate, organic wisdom, inner wisdom that we all hold, is what coherence looks and feels like, right? What we're all tapped into, not just us as humans, but all of nature, all of the cosmos. And the remembrance that happens when we start unpacking all of these layers of programming and conditioning is that we end up in this point where we no longer have external references to guide us. We can search deep and find this inside us, right? So the problem is that we're unfamiliar with this because all of our lives we've been taught to look outwards, externally for our answers, right? Not just for our bodies, but for our minds. We've always been told that the answers will be outside, and it's usually given by someone else, or it's been handed down to us. And our books, our systems, political system, financial system, educational system, and so on and so forth. But when you reach that point of collapse, which is why these dark nights of the soul are so transformative, because this is when you actually admit out loud that none of this has helped you, and you have to start stripping all of these layers away, and then you're left with a kind of a void. Not void in the sense of nothing, but void in the sense of potential, right? So you have to start feeling what all this potential is again. The way to do that is to be with yourself. You have to explore yourself, right? And the way to get there, again, is through that humility that says, okay, because I know nothing, I have nothing to lose. So let me play, let me be curious, let me be creative. Let's see what there really is in here. Let's see if the answer to this is what I've always thought it was, or if there's something else. Let me let go of everything I think I know and see if there really is something here. So it is a remembering, but it's also a stepping into. Yeah.
Our environment quietly stresses our bones. Fewer minerals, more sitting, more stress. Yin-care's Core Bono is a professional-grade formula with strontium, minerals, vitamin D3, K1, K2, and more to deeply nourish your skeletal strength. It's a dietary supplement, not a drug, and not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. I trust your body wisdom to choose what's right for you. Find Yin-care's Core Bono in our Womb Wisdom store at yincare.com/shop. So let's talk about your 6-week course that you're offering.
Okay, yeah. So this is starting on the 16th of June, and it's a group program, an online group program. And what we're going to do during these 6 weeks is we're going to be exploring the whole process of the dissolution and the becoming. So the steps, what we need for each step. We are building that bridge between where we are right now and where we want to become, exploring what we've had to let go of, and then how to step into this new place. And it doesn't mean that we're going to have all the answers, but it means we will have the tools to be able to navigate what is coming with that confidence and clarity and courage. So that's going to be really exciting, because I've already been working on this with my one-to-one clients, with my mentorship clients. But I think the group space will be particularly healing, because it's a group of women who've all been through very similar experiences. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
I think that's so cool, because I feel like there's a shedding that's happening in the fabric of our society, in a sense, for women right now. I've seen in multiple situations with different groups that I'm involved in, where women have come together to start sharing some of these deeper life issues that they're going through. And in my circle, it's more related around health crises, things that like we're oftentimes uncomfortable sharing. Like for fear of judgment of what, and like we discussed in the last episode that we did together, which was, other people have opinions about how you manage your own health. Like there's a lot of stuff, but what I'm finding is that women are starting to learn to open and support women in their own sovereign health choices, so I just think it's beautiful that in this particular scenario where women are going through an identity, collapse and reorientation of themselves, that they can come together to support each other, not just learn together, but to just be vulnerable together. Like that's so big.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's one of the biggest ways you can cultivate compassion. Compassion, what it is ultimately, putting yourself in another person's shoes, right? It's not about pity. It's not about, you are experiencing fully, or you are able to put yourself in that person's position and feel what they're feeling. And yeah, it's a very vulnerable place to be in. So when you are surrounded by other people who've been through something similar, it kind of opens up your lens of, well, it's not just me suffering, it's other people. I do remember specifically from my own experience, there was one particular point where I was in so much pain, in so much emotional pain, that I would be out on the street, say, walking my dogs, and I would think to myself, wow, how many people must be suffering right now? And how many times have I walked my dog before and not noticed all these people, but now I do notice them because I'm going through emotional pain. In the same way that you might go through the street, and if you might walk down the street, and if you're pregnant, you'll notice everybody else is pregnant, right? If you're driving a certain car, you'll notice everybody else. Well, the same thing happens when you're experiencing deep suffering. You suddenly open up to the idea that there are many people out there going through the same as you. And that is a big compassion builder.
Amazing.
And, yeah. And the other thing that from this compassion, there arises this sense of solidarity. And from the solidarity, that's where the real sisterhood emerges. And you know that when the tide rises, it rises for all the ships, right? So there is this genuine sisterhood, an authentic sisterhood that happens, not just this kind of, we're all women and we hate men and we're going to do. There's a genuine sisterhood because you have experienced the same kind of pain that they've experienced. And that really blows your heart wide open. And it's just so beautiful to have someone around you in that moment. It's like, like we say, we're just walking each other home.
Exactly. It's so, there's two things that came to my mind when you were saying that. The first was, I had a really interesting incident when this was all happening for me, right? And I was like you, in so much pain, emotional pain, and at the drop of tears, or the tears were coming at the drop of a hat, right? And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to go buy some really beautiful sunglasses, and then I can just cry behind my sunglasses and let the tears flow, right? So I go into this nice, like kind of fancy sunglass shop. And there's a man that's sitting there and he's picking out I think he was just picking out, reading glasses, like frames for reading, whatever, for life. And he says, and he's picking out some really bright colors. And I'm looking at sunglasses and he turns to me and he's got he's got someone with him, maybe in my mind, I'm remembering. And then the people that were working there, that were helping him. And he turns to me and he says, do these say I'm going to die? And they were like bright yellow framed glasses. And I said, no, those look really vibrant. Those look like you're living. And I was like, great. Because I have cancer and everyone thinks I'm going to die. And I thought, so then I turned to him and I said, do these look like I can cry as much as I want behind them? So we just had this exchange, we were both dealing with these situations, and it was just great, so I got these awesome glasses and I could cry as much as I wanted,
Yeah.
But the other thing that came for me when you were saying that was, and interestingly, I was listening to our last episode, in preparation for coming back together. And I mentioned this friend of mine in the last episode, and I would just honor her again because it's been a year since you did this, and she passed away a year ago. And her name is Jane Gould, and Jane was my supportive buddy. We were going through this together and supporting each other and holding that space and joking about things. And so I'll just share one quote that was the Jane quote. I didn't boldly share this before, but she told me at one time, she said, she had a beautiful British accent, and she said, remember, Margaret, this is just an exercise in bullshitness.
I love that. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You need that. You need that spaciousness and sense of humor. And yeah, wow. Just walking each other home.
Exactly.
It is.
Walking each other home. So profound. Exactly. Okay. So everyone, is there anything else that we should have said that we didn't? Is there anything that got left out? I mean, there were so many things, and I just kind of went with the flow for this.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want people to who want to identify whether they're going through an identity crisis or not. So, for example, what would be the signs that someone is going through an identity crisis? If anyone out there is doubting that they may be going through this.
That's such a good idea.
What could it be?
What are the signs?
Yeah.
You have some signs?
I actually just created a little PDF that I am going to put on my Instagram. So if anyone out there is, kind of thinking, well, I feel like I'm going through this. Well, what are the actual signs? The first sign, I mean, it's quite an obvious one, is that your body will start sending you signals. There are things that you may have been ignoring for a long time. Your body kind of knows before your mind does that something is about to change. And you might be feeling off, you might be feeling irritable, you might be feeling anxious, you might have maybe some physical symptoms. But yeah, that's one of the obvious and not so obvious, because we don't usually, most people don't usually listen to their bodies. Another thing that could happen is that your days start becoming more monotonous. Like one day starts blurring into the next. The things that used to bring you joy no longer bring you joy. Because people think that an identity collapse happens because of one big, massive trauma. Not necessarily. It can be a whole series of things that lead you to then one day say, I've had enough. So you feel like a kind of a disconnect, or there's a mismatch between being true to yourself and trying to keep the stability in your life, right? So this could look like, I actually have a friend who this happened to a short while ago. She started becoming very interested in holistic therapies and healing modalities, and she wanted to learn these things. And her husband was not into this at all. So not only was he not into it, but he just didn't like her doing it either. And she had to be true to herself. And she found that the truer she was to herself, the more further apart she became from her husband and people around her, right? So she had to make that choice. Do I keep this stability in my life, or do I honor what I really feel like I have to do and then move away from the people who are not supporting me? And that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. Another one is the tools that once used to help you no longer hit the spot. So, for example, if to help you with a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of nervous system regulation, you would use, say, meditation or mindfulness or any other modality, that no longer serves you the way you were doing it, because you've evolved to a point where that medicine cannot be administered anymore, at least not the same dosage, right? Because just what you're experiencing is expanding, right? So the medicine needs to change. So you find that even friends that used to comfort you, for example, may no longer be able to, or they don't understand where you're moving into anymore. So it's a very lonely feeling, basically, because you feel like, I can't explain this to these people, to my family, to my friends, the people who've always held me. They don't see what I see anymore. And especially if that transition is going hand to hand with an awakening, right? If you're already stepping into that awakening and you seeing the reality in a completely different way, you no longer feel supported by people who just don't understand what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're feeling, what you're going through. So it can be terribly lonely. Yeah.
I would just add one more thing, maybe, or just put it out there for consideration. But one thing that I noticed for me that happened as I started making these sort of baby choices to move myself, my physical circumstances more into alignment with who I was becoming, which meant making decisions about my relationship, my marriage at the time, was that the universe started responding in all of these incredibly magical ways. I had flock of crows that were circling over our house. I had a white pigeon, which is it would be like a white dove, but there were no doves around that house. So it came in the form of literally an albino pigeon showed up at the back door of the house. There was just like constant, and I do have like a deep affinity with birds, like as it turns, but there were so many different signs in nature that were so bold, I couldn't ignore them. They just kept showing up. So I just wanted to add that in.
That's beautiful. And that's actually your original intelligence at work. That's your body attuning itself to the reality that it's moving into before your mind is ready to catch up with that. Right? So it's really interesting. Yeah, that these synchronicities, they do come up, and your body recognizes it, but your mind kind of still not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The other thing I don't know, I'm trying to think if this falls into some of the categories, but for me, one of the things that I noticed was I was experiencing mentally, I thought things were great. But when I really started to consciously perceive my emotions and that were running through me, there was a constant state of fear running through my body.
Yeah.
And that was related to the not so great relationship I was in, but things like I always share the story of he was really very particular about how I washed the dishes, like stupid stuff that were like so bad. And I started realizing that I was living in a state of fear about how I was doing everything in a house, where I was putting things. If there was cold beer in the refrigerator when he got home, the dishes thing was, he had this thing where I couldn't use the scrubby, scratchy side of the sponge on the silverware when I was washing it, like there were all these things accommodations that I was making for him in this relationship that were creating fear in how I just live every day. So,
and that's spot on, because remember, fear is the opposite of coherence.
Exactly.
You're in complete incoherence, which means you're not free. You don't have freedom.
No.
Right? So you feel trapped, right? And there is like you said, this almost a desperation, because you're in survival mode. When you're in fear, you're trapped. You're not free. You're not free. And the body and the mind and the spirit wants to be free. It's our original state, right? This freedom. So yeah, that is a very important sign. You lose this kind of joy, this freedom, this ability to express yourself without fear, without feeling there's going to be a reproach or reprimand, or you're going to be judged or criticized. If you are living in a space where you fear to talk, or you fear to be yourself, or you fear to express yourself, there's no freedom. You are living in incoherence, and the only thing that causes is more incoherence, more imbalance, more dissonance, which creates more fear, right? And then you get into this resistance, right? Because you know that you have to move, but you're fearful, you're scared of moving.
I just want to add to that I feel moved to say is I believe that my ex wasn't living in his coherence either. And I wasn't helping the situation, And so in many ways, even though there's a perception, right, from the outside that I harmed him or hurt him by initiating the leaving of the relationship, it was an incredible gift, because I'm the one who mustered up the courage to go back to the courage to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's his life to live, but I, I do know in my heart that I gifted him the opportunity to shift in ways that he may have, shifted him out of what was his comfort zone.
Yeah. And it's funny how you said it was a gift, because in all of these very explosive, implosive situations, there's always a huge paradox. And that's why they're so transformative, right? That's why these rites of passage involve having to walk through that fear, having to walk on top of that burning coal, and then getting to the other side. And it just reminded me, you were talking about the synchronicities and things that happen around that time. And I remember around that time, this word just came to me. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure what this word meant. I had an idea, but I had to Google it. And the word was windfall. And when I looked at this word, it had two very opposite meanings. One was great grief, and the other one was this great fortune, like winning the lottery or something, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I will never forget that, because that's exactly what happened. In that collapse, something incredible came out of that. And that's the beauty of walking through that. Because when you get to the other side, you feel so incredibly elated and so incredibly grateful that you had the courage to walk through that, even though it took you longer than you thought, even though you went round in circles first forever before deciding to do that, even though you may not have done it the way you thought you were going to do it, but you walked through, and that took courage. And then that's where that transformation happens. But you need that that moment of complete dissolution and unpacking to be able to get to the other side.
Oh gosh, I love it so much. I wish that, that you had been the one that I had on my funeral when I was going through it. Although I will shout out to Smitty Wormuth, who was my clairvoyant astrologist, who somehow helped me navigate through everything to get where I was. Thank God for Smitty. And she didn't do anything like you're offering, which is amazing, So I just encourage everybody. So let me pull up your Instagram account so people can check that out and see that. Let me see if I can put it up here so it's a little easier. Yeah, it's Instagram. It's at school, SCHOOL _of _O dot and it's School of Original Intelligence. And she has amazing posts. So if you're not following her, you definitely need to follow Patricia. And tell us again the date that it starts. June
16th.
June 16th. And what is it? What are you calling it again?
So June 15th is the online group program, Journey Back to You. Right. And June 6th is the masterclass, the live masterclass. So that's like a 2.5 hour masterclass where I walk you through the mastery tools.
And can sign up for that off of your Instagram?
Exactly. Just on the link in the bio. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, great. Yeah. And that's going to be amazing. So the masterclass is free. Is that right?
No, that has a cost. And yeah, but I do have some free PDFs and resources in that link as well. So there's something for everybody.
That's perfect. That's great. Wonderful. Well, check out Patricia. So then just going back one more time, is there anything else that we left out today that would be important to talk about before we close?
I think the final message probably be that everybody needs a Sherpa. at some point. Everybody needs a guide, and you don't have to navigate this alone. Yeah.
100%. I second that. I infinity that, in fact, don't even try to go it alone.
It's really difficult.
No. Oh my gosh. So wonderful having you on today. Thank you so much
It was lovely. Thank you.
For your presence, for what you're offering the world. It's so, so big for women. And yeah, I'm excited to hear back from all the women that end up joining you, because I know you're going to shift and help them to change things for themselves and see who they're going to become, because we need everyone to come into their true coherence and tap back into their original intelligence. So thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Wow, that was amazing. My prayer is that this conversation with Patricia has given you profound structural relief, loosened the grip of any survival fear you've been carrying, and handed you a visceral mirror to see that your moments of undoing are actually the very spaces where your true mastery is born. Remember, when you claim courage as your base foundation, identity collapse stops being tragedy and becomes a holy death portal. You don't have to just survive the messy chrysalis of your transformation. You have everything you need to completely thrive through it. If you're ready to walk this road of self-mastery further and you want to anchor into Patricia's exquisite medicine, please check out the show notes or the description below right now. Her premier masterclass is launching on June 6th, followed by her incredible 6-week container Journey Back to You that's launching on June 16th. Don't try to navigate the chrysalis alone. Go grab your Sherpa and lock in your space over on Patricia's Instagram account at school_of_o.I. If this sacred transmission served your soul today, it truly supports our collective herd and our work when you like this episode and leave us a review. Share this specific transmission with a sister who's currently sitting in the middle of her own messy, gooey dissolution, and subscribe or turn on your notifications so you never miss a beat of our movement. You can find the Yin-care podcast on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can stay deeply woven into our daily sanctuary on Instagram at yin_care, or on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble at Yin-care. We're still riding that wild, potent wave of the year of the fire horse, a magnificent year that invites you to take your reins back, drop out of external dependency, and become the supreme, coherent creator of your own life and health. May you stay rooted in the herd and rise wild and free. I'm Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising. This has been the Yin-care podcast. Thank you so much for walking this deep road with me. Until next time, honor yourself, celebrate your strength, and empower your transformation with your Yin-care. When our sensitive tissues are off, everything is off. That's one of the many reasons I absolutely love Yin-care's Herbal Wash. This incredible Taoist formula gently nudges the vaginal microbiome back into balance. Not to mention, it feels amazing. So get your hands on some Yin-care's Herbal Wash today. That's YINCARE.com. Restore, rejuvenate, and refresh with Yin-care.